Where legends breathe again. EldMyth. She is the huntress who feared no beast, the moonlit guardian of the wild, a protector, a killer, and a goddess unlike any other. Tonight, we uncover the untamed legacy of Artemis, the divine huntress whose arrows shaped the ancient world. The ancient world whispers to us still, not in words we can easily decipher, but in the language of myth, carved into the weathered stones of forgotten temples and breathed through the rustling leaves of primordial forests. It is a language that speaks of wonders beyond our comprehension, of beings that shape the very fabric of reality. Among these myriad voices, one name echoes with a particular haunting resonance: Artemis. Not the familiar Greek goddess of the hunt, but a far more enigmatic and ancient entity, a creature of paradox and profound power. Who, or what was Artemis? Was it a guardian spirit of the untamed wilds, a celestial architect of the starry firmament, or a vengeful force of nature's unforgiving law? Our journey begins not with an answer, but with a quest into the heart of this mystery. We will traverse mist-shrouded valleys and scale mountains that pierce the heavens, seeking the traces she left behind. We will decipher the symbols in crumbling grimoires and listen to the echoes of old tales told by firelight, stories that speak of a presence both beautiful and terrifying, a being whose essence is woven from moonlight and shadow, from the gentle hush of a snowfall and the ferocious roar of a gale. Prepare to step into a realm where the boundaries between legend and history blur, where every rustle in the undergrowth could be a message, and every star in the night sky could be a sigil of her design. The story of Artemis is waiting to be remembered. To understand Artemis, we must first look to the oldest known cultures of the northern lands, the peoples who lived in such intimate symbiosis with the forest that they saw not a collection of trees, but a living, breathing entity. The earliest mentions are not in grand epics, but in fragmented runic inscriptions on standing stones, speaking of the stag-crowned watcher or the shepherd of constellations. Scholars believe Artemis was a pre-deific entity, a conceptual force that predated the pantheons of gods we know today. She was the embodiment of the wild itself, not merely a spirit within it, but the consciousness of the untamed world. Ancient petroglyphs found deep within secluded caves depict a hybrid figure, part human, part great stag, with antlers that seem to branch into the very star patterns of the night sky. Her hands are often shown not holding weapons, but cradling a swirling nebula of light or gently touching the roots of a colossal world tree. This was her domain, the sacred intersection of the terrestrial and the celestial. She was the law of nature, absolute and impartial, a force of both creation and dissolution. To these early people, Artemis was not worshipped in temples of stone, but in the open cathedrals of ancient pine forests, under the open vault of the heavens. She was the reason the sun rose, the reason the seasons turned, and the silent judge of all who walked under her canopy. Interaction with such a fundamental force was not a matter of prayer, but of observance and ritual. There were no priests of Artemis, only seekers, druids, and those who understood the old ways. Specific rituals were performed at liminal spaces, the edge of a forest at dawn, the bank of a moonlit lake, the peak of a hill on the solstice. Offerings were not of gold or sacrifice, but of action and respect. A hunter seeking her blessing for a successful hunt would not simply ask. He would spend a night in silent vigil, learning the patterns of the animals, understanding the balance of the herd. He would leave an offering of his own hair or a carefully woven circlet of ivy, symbols of his own vitality and connection to the earth. To encounter Artemis was a rare and transformative event, often accidental and always profound. A woodcutter lost in a sudden, supernatural blizzard might glimpse a towering, antlered silhouette through the driving snow, a presence that exuded not malice but a stern, testing energy. If he showed courage and respect, he would find himself guided to safety by a path of strangely luminescent foxfire. But if his heart was full of greed or cruelty, the forest itself would turn against him. the trees seeming to close in, the very wind whispering threats. These encounters were the basis of folklore, teaching that one did not conquer nature, but coexisted with it through humility and awareness. One of the most enduring and poignant legends of Artemis is the tale of the weeping stag. It tells of a time when a great blight fell upon the land, a creeping gray silence that killed plants and drove animals mad with fear. The source was a profound spiritual wound. A king, in his arrogance, had ordered the heart of the forest, the oldest and most sacred grove, to be felled to build his throne room. As the ancient trees fell, a deep sorrow gripped the world. It is said that Artemis, feeling the agony of her domain, manifested not in fury, but in profound grief. She took the form of a magnificent silver-white stag, and wherever she walked, she wept tears of pure, liquid moonlight. These tears fell upon the gray, blighted earth, and where they landed, luminescent silver flowers bloomed, pushing back the decay and restoring life. The legend follows a young, humble flute player named Alara, who was drawn by the haunting, beautiful sound of the stag's weeping. She followed the trail of glowing flowers deep into the wounded forest, her own simple music a gentle counterpoint to the creature's sorrow. This was not a quest of violence, but of empathy and healing, a journey to mend a rupture between humanity and the wild. Alara's journey was fraught with subtle dangers, not from monsters but from the despair of the land itself. The air was cold and still, devoid of birdsong. The streams ran sluggish and silent. She encountered other forest spirits like the usually mischievous leshy, now sitting motionless and forlorn at the bases of their trees, their leafy beards wilted. They did not threaten her, but their silent, accusatory stares were a heavier burden than any weapon. Guided only by the trail of glowing flowers and the distant, heart-wrenching sound of weeping, Alara pressed on. She used her flute not as a tool of power, but as an offering of solidarity, playing melodies that mirrored the land's sorrow, acknowledging the pain rather than trying to overpower it. Finally, in the very center of the felled grove, amidst the stumps of the great trees, she found the weeping stag. The creature was colossal, its form semi-transparent like condensed mist in starlight. It looked at her, and in its deep, liquid eyes, Alara saw not the anger of a god but the profound, timeless grief of the world itself. She did not speak, but simply sat and began to play the most honest, mournful, and beautiful song she had ever composed, a lament for the fallen grove. As Alara's lament filled the silent grove, a miracle began to unfold. The stag's tears, which had been falling steadily, now flowed towards the sound of her flute, swirling around the stumps in rivulets of liquid light. Where this luminous moisture touched the ravaged earth, new life erupted with impossible speed. Not just the silver flowers, but shoots of vibrant green broke through the soil, climbing and twisting into young saplings before her very eyes. The stag's form began to change, its sorrowful posture straightening, its antlers blazing with the light of a newborn star. It was not Alara who healed the forest, but Artemis herself, who, through the girl's act of profound empathy and acknowledgement, found the will to regenerate. The blight receded like a bad memory, and color and sound returned to the world in a rush. The leshy stirred from their stupor, and the birds began to sing again. The weeping stag looked at Alara one last time, and for a fleeting moment, its expression was one of gratitude and peace. Then, it dissolved into a shower of sparkling light that rose into the sky, joining the constellations above. The legend teaches that Artemis, as the soul of the wild, responds not to command, but to understanding, that true power lies not in domination, but in symbiotic respect. Yet the nature of Artemis is one of balance, and for every tale of gentle healing, there is one of fearsome retribution. This is starkly illustrated in the legend known as the Starfall Hunt. It tells of a mighty, arrogant hunter named Kalin, who boasted that no beast could escape his spear, not even the mythical stag-crowned one himself. He sought not understanding, but a trophy to cement his legacy. He ventured into the deepest woods during a celestial event when the stars were said to be closest to the earth, believing this was when Artemis would be most visible. For weeks, he tracked signs no other could see, a footprint of frost in summer, a whisper on the wind that spoke of ancient paths. He finally found his quarry in a high mountain meadow under a sky ablaze with shooting stars. Artemis appeared not as a weeping spirit, but as a terrifying and magnificent warrior form, a colossal figure clad in living bark and obsidian, with antlers like polished nightstone that seemed to snag the passing stars, pulling their fiery trails behind her. This was the aspect of the inevitable hunter, the embodiment of nature's predatory and unforgiving side. Kalen, faced with this awe-inspiring visage, felt his courage turn to ice in his veins. This was not a beast to be hunted, it was a force of cosmic law. He threw his spear, his finest weapon, enchanted and unerring. It flew true, striking the creature's chest, and shattered into 1,000 splinters of light, absorbed harmlessly into the swirling energy of its form. Artemis did not roar in anger. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any sound. She simply looked at Kalen, and in that gaze he saw the infinite cold of space, the relentless turn of galaxies, and the ultimate fate of all living things. He was not struck down by a weapon. Instead, the starfall hunt began. The ground fell away beneath him, and he was running not on Earth, but across the starfields of the night sky. Constellations shifted around him, forming the shapes of great hounds of nebular gas and cometary ice. He was the prey, hunted by the very cosmos he had sought to conquer. He ran for what felt like eternities, his breath turning to frost in the void, his heart pounding with a terror beyond mortal comprehension. This was his punishment: to understand, intimately and forever, the fear of the hunted, to experience the chase from the perspective of the countless creatures he had slain without a second thought. When dawn finally broke, Kalen was found, shivering and mute on the edge of his own village. His hair had turned white, and his eyes held the distant, haunted look of one who has seen infinity. He never hunted again. He became a hermit, a storyteller of sorts, though he could only communicate through gestures and drawings in the sand. His tale, pieced together by the village shamans, served as a stark warning for generations. The legend of the Starfall Hunt illustrates the aspect of Artemis as the great balancer. She is not a moral judge of good and evil, but the enforcer of natural law. Arrogance, the belief that one is above the cycle of life and death, is the ultimate transgression in her eyes. She is the check on humanity's hubris, a reminder that we are part of a vast, interconnected system, not its masters. This story, passed down around campfires, taught respect for the hunt, for the prey, and for the delicate balance that sustains all life. It showed that Artemis could be as cold and merciless as a winter gale, just as she could be as nurturing as the spring sun. Beyond these grand legends, Artemis was also intricately linked to the smaller, yet equally vital, spirits of the wild, such as the Ruzalki, the water nymphs of Slavic lore. In one lesser-known tale, a community of Ruzalki, whose lake was being poisoned by runoff from an upstream forge, appealed to the higher authority of the forest. They did so through a ritual of desperate beauty. On a night of the full moon, they gathered on the shore and began a haunting, melodic chant, weaving their long, flowing hair with glowing algae and water lilies. Their song was not of words, but of pure emotion, a symphony of the lake's suffering. This aquatic lament traveled on the night breeze, through root and stone, until it reached the consciousness of Artemis. She responded not by confronting the blacksmiths directly, but by sending a different kind of messenger. A great silent owl, its feathers the color of midnight and its eyes like full moons, flew to the village. It perched on the lintel of the head blacksmith's home and simply stared into his window, its gaze piercing his dreams. The blacksmith, a practical man not given to superstition, awoke with a start, the image of the dying lake and the weeping Ruzalki seared into his mind. He felt a compulsion, a deep, undeniable urge to find the source of the pollution. Guided by a strange intuition, the blacksmith, whose name was Borislav, followed the stream up to his own forge the next day. He saw, for the first time, the oily sheen on the water, the dead fish, and the wilting plants along the bank. The owl visitation had opened his eyes, not with fear, but with a sudden, profound understanding of the interconnectedness he had blindly disrupted. He did not need a threat or a decree from a god. He felt the wrongness in his very soul. He immediately set to work, designing a new system to contain and filter the runoff, a labor that cost him time and profit. His neighbors thought him mad, but he persisted. As the lake slowly began to heal, the Ruzalki's lament turned to a song of gratitude. It is said that on the night the water ran clear again, Borislav saw a vision from his window, the great, antlered silhouette of Artemis standing at the edge of the forest, nodding once in silent approval before dissolving into the mist. This story showcases Artemis's role as an ecosystem regulator, working through a network of lesser spirits and the awakened conscience of humanity itself. She is the balance that restores itself, sometimes through terror, sometimes through subtle influence. The symbolism of Artemis is as layered as her legends. Her antlers represent both the branching of life, the family trees of animals, the sprawling roots of forests, the dendritic patterns of rivers and lightning, and a direct antenna to the cosmos, symbolizing her connection to celestial cycles and stellar knowledge. The stars that often accompany her depictions are not random. They are specific constellations that ancient cultures associated with the changing seasons, animal migrations, and planting cycles. She was, in essence, a living almanac and celestial clock. The contrast between her gentle, healing form and her fearsome, hunter aspect represents the core duality of nature. It is both nurturing and destructive, creative and consumptive. One cannot exist without the other. The silver tears of the weeping stag symbolize the emotional capacity of the natural world, its ability to feel pain and joy, a concept that modern ecology is only now beginning to grasp scientifically. The cosmic hunt of Kalen represents the ultimate perspective, that from the vantage point of the universe, our human struggles and arrogance are both minuscule and profoundly significant within the intricate web of cause and effect. The cultural impact of the Artemis mythos has been quiet but persistent. While she never achieved the mainstream fame of Greek or Norse gods, her essence seeped into the bedrock of European folklore. She is the archetype of the wild hunt, a spectral parade of hunters led by a horned figure across the sky, a omen of war or catastrophe. She is the spiritual ancestor of later forest gods like Cernunnos. In modern times, her influence is felt in the fantasy genre. The elegant, powerful elves of J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle-earth, with their deep connection to the forests and the stars, carry her echo. She appears in the myriad of fantasy novels and games as the Horned God or the Forest Queen, a patron of rangers and druids. Environmental movements have, perhaps unconsciously, adopted her symbolism, framing the earth not as a resource to be exploited, but as a living, feeling entity, Gaia, that requires our respect and protection. The modern understanding of ecology, of ecosystems, trophic cascades, and biodiversity, is the scientific articulation of the balance that Artemis mythically represented for millennia. In contemporary art and film, the aesthetic of Artemis is unmistakable. We see it in the design of otherworldly creatures, in the depiction of magical forests that feel both alive and sentient, and in the portrayal of nature's wrath in disaster films. She is the personification of the sublime in nature, that which is beautiful precisely because it is terrifyingly powerful and indifferent to us. Modern pagans and neo-druids often look to her as a key deity in their practices, seeing in her a more nuanced and holistic representation of the divine than the often anthropomorphized gods of old. Festivals celebrating the solstices and equinoxes, the turning points of the year she once governed, are seeing a resurgence. In a world increasingly dominated by concrete and digital screens, the myth of Artemis calls us back to something primal and essential. It asks us to remember that we are animals of this earth, subject to its laws and dependent on its health. Her stories are not mere entertainment. They are a deep-seated cultural memory of a time when humanity lived in conscious dialogue with the world around it. So what is the essence of Artemis? She is the whisper in the wind that tells the geese to fly south. She is the silent force that pushes the seedling through the cracked asphalt. She is the terrible, beautiful logic of the predator and the prey. She is the memory of the star-strewn sky reflected in a still mountain lake. Our journey through her myths and symbols reveals a being that defies simple categorization. She is a guardian, a destroyer, a creator, and a witness. The legends of the weeping stag and the starfall hunt are not contradictions, but two sides of the same leaf. They teach us that the natural world responds to us in the manner we approach it. With empathy, it offers healing and renewal. With hubris, it delivers a harsh, cosmic lesson. As we face an era of unprecedented environmental change, the ancient stories of Artemis feel more relevant than ever. They are a compass pointing back to a path of balance, a reminder that we are not separate from nature, but a part of its grand, intricate, and often mysterious story. The question is no longer who was Artemis, but are we still willing to listen to what she has to say? Another legend fades, but the next awaits. Like this video, subscribe and continue the journey through myths.